Hey there, welcome to the module on recovering to win. And just as the name implies, in this module, we're going to be covering how to improve your recovery throughout the Metamorphosis program so you get the best results possible. Now, to start out with, let's talk about what is recovery to begin with, because recovery can mean a lot of different things, different people, and how you understand that is going to be a big part of making sure you're doing the right things to improve it. So the biggest thing here is that recovery is a process, and it's a process of restoring the body's homeostasis and its homeostatic balance we talked about earlier. And as part of that, it drives energy towards adapting to the stress. So in the context of training, that means it's the process of applying and directing energy towards improving the areas that were stressed by training in order to make them bigger, stronger, more resilient, more efficient, and all those sorts of things. So recovery is a process first and foremost. Now let's talk about how that plays out in terms of the actual training process. Well, that comes back to the recovery trajectory. So let's look at this from a basic standpoint of first, we're going to put our body under some load. And this is a stress, this is a training stress. So of course, volume and intensity are going to be the biggest things to determine how much stress that is. And that's the variables that we can control in terms of the workout. Now on the recovery side, it's the biggest factors are sleep, nutrition, mental stress, overall activity, those sorts of things. Those are going to dictate what that recovery drive, that recovery response by the body actually looks like. So in this case, let's say we have a moderate training stress followed by a fairly small level of recovery. It means it's going to be a fairly slow process that we go through in order to do exactly what we talked about, restore homeostasis, and then make the different tissues more resilient, bigger, stronger, basically more fit. Now, what if we have a stronger recovery drive? We have more sleep, we have better nutrition, we have less mental stress, all these sorts of things. Well, in that case, we're going to see exactly that, a stronger drive towards recovery. And we're therefore going to see the body recover faster. So it's going to control the speed of recovery. And then of course, finally, if we really dial things in, okay, we get our sleep just really nailed, our nutrition's on point, we're mentally relaxed, we're not dealing with a bunch of stress, our activity is managed effectively, well, then we're going to see this big recovery drive and we're going to see the body's recovery trajectory be much higher. So it's this process again over and over again that sets how effectively your body will respond to training. So in that sense, recovery is ultimately what drives how much training stress your body can adapt to without accumulating fatigue. And that's a big thing to understand, because as you go through the Metamorphosis program, the goal, of course, is to see continued improvement from start to finish. And the biggest obstacle to that will be if you start to accumulate fatigue from one week to the next. Now, the other thing to consider here is this concept of energy. Okay, we've talked about this quite a bit before, but you have to start looking at the big picture of how the body uses the energy resources it's got. So we've got all these tissues throughout the body, from your brain to your muscles, your organs, bone, even all these different tissues, all the cells in your body need energy. And so let's talk about where this energy has to go, because again, there's a finite supply, which we'll talk about in a second. So the biggest thing is you've got your essential biological functions. Right? This is your basic metabolic rate stuff. This is right around probably 70%-ish of the total energy you're going to expend in a day. And this is basically the minimum amount of calories that your cells need to stay alive and function, basically, to keep you on this earth. And again, that's a big percentage of the overall energy you're going to produce. It's for that purpose. Now, on the other side of it, we've got physical activity and mental stress. And you think, well, why do we put those in the same bucket? Well, we put them in the same bucket because they both drive the need for energy. And if you're sitting there, you're mentally stressed out, your heart rate goes up. That tells you that you're producing more energy. Same thing, obviously, when we're training, we're being physically active, our heart rate goes up because we're producing more energy relative to rest. Now, of course, being mentally stressed in the short term doesn't produce more energy than a workout. But if we extrapolate a high level of mental stress all day, it can have a significant impact, again, on where our body is putting energy that it has available. Now, the other category, the other bucket here, is really the one we care about, and that's fitness. Now, those would basically be considered non-essential biological function. Your body doesn't have to build a bigger muscle. Your body doesn't have to make more mitochondria. Your body doesn't have to make stronger, more resilient soft tissues and tendons and ligaments and whatnot. Those are non-essential to survival, but those are essential to what we're trying to get out of our training program. But again, from the body standpoint, it's not going to compromise your survival for your bigger muscles. Now, the biggest problem with this is we have to understand that there are limits to our body's energy production. And this is what's called the constrained model of total energy expenditure. You can look up Dr. Herman Ponzer if you haven't seen this before. But basically what it shows us is as we increase our expenditure of energy towards activity, we ultimately don't have an unending supply of energy, as we've talked about. So therefore, it's going to come from other areas. It's going to come from the non-essential areas. So just because we go 20,000 steps doesn't mean our body produced twice as many calories if we went 10,000 steps. It means it pulled some of those calories away from other areas, mostly non-essential. And if you keep going to a very extreme level of physical activity, it will even start to pull them away from those essential areas. So fitness is non-essential, as I said. That means the body will not compromise your survival to improve your fitness. And because there is a limited amount of energy, which actually we'll talk about more in a couple other lessons, but because of that, you have to be aware that there are limitations to how much you can recover and how fast you can recover. And those limitations are largely driven by how you expend energy in the other areas. Now, the other thing to consider is as part of this compensation, as part of how the body works, it will not only take energy away from recovery, it'll take energy away from basic metabolic functions to begin with. So this is from a paper fairly recently called Energy Compensation in Adiposity in Humans and Adiposity. And it basically showed that up to 28% or 20% on average of the calories that you burned in a workout actually came away from those other biological functions that I talked about rather than being an additional thing. So that means only 72% roughly of the calories in the workout were additional calories that your body wouldn't have otherwise burned, because it's taking the other 28%, almost a third, away from other areas of the body. So again, this is just because our body doesn't have this unending pool of energy it can draw from. So it has to be wise and distribute the energy it does have in a way that's going to maximize your chances of survival above all else. Now, the body also has other ways to compensate. All right, it can demotivate you to move, and it can increase your motivation to eat. So this is other things. These are other things the body and the brain can do to try to get you to move less and eat more if it senses that it's not fundamentally recovering or it's under a tremendous amount of stress. So to put these pieces together, I call it the recover to win model. And there are 5 big pillars we're going to talk about throughout the rest of this module. The first thing is we have to build efficient movement patterns, and we have to get the right amount of right amount of activity each day in order to do 2 things: improve our fitness and support recovery. And that means understanding how much energy we should be spending on a daily basis through both of those. Now, we also have to be able to manage our daily training, our volume and our intensity, in order to prevent fatigue from accumulating from week to week, as I mentioned, because it's this accumulation of fatigue that ultimately sets off the cascade of events where we end up overtrained and under-recovered and see a lack of results. We want to make sure we get enough calories from the right sources at the right time to fuel workouts and recovery. So everybody knows nutrition is important, and that's simply because it is providing the fuel that all our cells are running on. Now, we also need to get sleep. Sleep is the most anabolic. It is the point in your life where you are the most recovery oriented and the most energy is going towards recovery. So if you're not getting enough sleep, you're fundamentally shortchanging your recovery. It's a big piece of the puzzle that you absolutely have to spend time and energy on if you are not getting enough of it. And then last but not least, you want to use targeted regeneration strategies. And I mean targeted in the sense that not just random ad hoc shotgun approach, but targeted strategies that are going to help you improve your recovery. And again, all 5 of these different pillars of this recover to win model or concept work together. So the more efficient you move, the more effective you manage your training intensity, the more sound nutrition you get dialed in, the more sleep you get, the more regeneration strategies. All these things, again, work together to fundamentally speed up recovery and therefore allow you to get the most out of your training. So that wraps up this lesson. We're going to dive into the rest of the pieces of the model, and up next we talk about how many steps you should actually take in a day.